Ambulances and aid trucks lined up at Egypt's Rafah border crossing with Gaza on Tuesday, moving towards the sole exit route for more than 2 million residents. The crossing had been largely shut for months during the war. Israel reopened it on Monday, allowing a limited number of Palestinians to leave as part of a US-backed plan to end the conflict. However, strict Israeli security checks slowed the process. On the first day of reopening, only 12 Palestinians entered Egypt, including 5 injured people and 7 companions, even though officials had set a higher number for crossings. It is still unclear how many people have entered Gaza as the border remains open to only a small number of pedestrians each day. We are now being joined by Saul Sadkar, who's a political commentator, joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Does the limited number of people allowed to leave Gaza reflect logistical issues or political restrictions, do you think?
Well, it's a mix of both. On the one hand, the deal agreed is meant to allow up to 50 in a day and up to 200 or so out every day if they want to leave. Although from speaking to Israeli officials, they have no objection at all to anyone who wants to leave leaving. And on the contrary, it's the Egyptians who want to limit the number of people leaving rather than anyone else. But the practical level, there's no real limit on the practical number of people who can leave or come in. It's mostly a political issue.
How might the slow evacuation of patients affect trust in the US-backed ceasefire and future negotiations?
Well, the peculiar thing, we'll find out the next few weeks, is that the humanitarian exit for people who are sick and their relatives has been continuing all throughout the war, even at the darkest moments. So that never really went through Rafah anyway. It went through a different crossing via Israel and onwards to Jordan. So that really isn't relevant here. This is meant to be for actual non-ill people who just want to leave. And I expect that perhaps the first day was difficult, but over time it will ramp up. Certainly Israel is absolutely no objection to anyone that wants to leave the war zone, leaving the war zone. The reason they haven't been allowed to leave the war zone in the past is despite Israel's insistence that they have the opportunity to, because the Egyptians didn't want to let them in. They have no at all, and my assumption is that over the next weeks and months, that very slow trickle will increase in its volume.
And could the control of Gaza's administration under the ceasefire create tensions between local authorities and international actors?
The authority that Hamas remains in control of 40% of the Gaza Strip. The Israelis hold 60% of it. In order to get from the Hamas-controlled area to Egypt, they need to cross through about 3 kilometers of Israeli IDF-controlled territory. I'm sure there are processes in place to ensure that doesn't cause any issues. Time will tell if it works out well. So far, there haven't been any issues. And in fact, over the past couple of months, many thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of Gazans have left via Israel through a similar procedure.
And do you think neighbouring countries should take a more active role in ensuring aid and medical access, or would that risk escalating tensions?
The only neighbouring country here is Egypt. The other neighbouring countries to Israel are not really party to this. Certainly Syria and Lebanon are in a worse situation than Gaza, perhaps. And Jordan has been doing their bit. And there's no reason the Israelis don't object to the people in Egypt or Jordan helping. On the contrary, they're delighted to have them participate in helping out the Gazan civilian population. It's just that everything needs to go checked, because there have been many cases in the past where weapons have been found inside bags of humanitarian aid and this kind of thing. So everything that goes into Gaza is checked carefully by Israel, and that prevents any kind of problems that you mentioned.
And do you think in the next couple of days or weeks it will be used more and it will be more of a flow on the border?
I would assume so, because we know from opinion polling of the Gazan population that the vast majority would very much like to leave Gaza, at least temporarily. The majority of the buildings in Gaza are no longer fit for human habitation, as it's been a war zone for 2.5 years, and the buildings primarily were used as weapons dumps. There were tunnels dug underneath them, and the result of the destruction of the urban environment is extraordinary. And majority Gazans are no longer living in their homes. A very large number are living in tents. And a majority, again, would very much like to be living somewhere else, at least until Gaza can be rebuilt. But the rebuilding of Gaza is at least a 10 to 20 year process. There is almost no place in the world that has been destroyed to the extent that Gaza has been, that has ever been rebuilt. So the rebuilding of Gaza will be a first in human history, more or less, and will take a very long time. And in the meantime, my guess is the Gazans, or most of them, don't want to spend a large chunk of their existence on this planet living amid rubble in tents. So my guess is yes, but we'll see. And it depends on the cooperation of Egyptians and people of goodwill around the world. There are other people, of course, who would very much like to see the Gazans remain living in the rubble and in the tents, either because they hate them or because they would rather see them used essentially as human weapons against the West and Israel than them being able to live a decent life.
Don't go too far, so we will come back to you in just a moment.